The Galactic Empire's dominion stretched across the stars, a sprawling tapestry of conquered worlds bound by the iron will of its rulers. Their fleets, sleek and merciless, cast long shadows over the galaxy, and their technology, a fusion of alien ingenuity and cold logic, rendered them nearly invincible. To the Empire, humanity was little more than a footnote in their grand narrative. A primitive species clinging to scattered colonies, their defiance an amusing but ultimately futile gesture. The Empire had crushed countless civilizations before, and humanity would be no different. Or so they believed. On the fringes of imperial space, humanity's colonies clung to survival like weeds breaking through cracks in stone. They were a fractured people, united only by their shared determination to resist the Empire's encroachment. Among them, whispers of rebellion stirred, but hope was a scarce commodity. The Empire's recent ultimatum had left little room for negotiation. Surrender or face annihilation. Most colonies had chosen defiance, but defiance alone could not stop the tide of imperial warships now bearing down on them. In the heart of the Empire's capital, Emperor Zorith sat upon a throne forged from the bones of conquered worlds. His pale, angular face betrayed no emotion as he listened to the reports of his advisors. "The humans continue to resist," said General Vrax, his voice a low growl. "Their colonies are scattered, but their leaders rally them against us. They are persistent." Zorith's lips curled into a faint smile, though his eyes remained cold. "Persistence is a virtue," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "But even the most persistent pests must be eradicated. Send the assassins." The assassins were the Empire's most feared enforcers, genetically engineered killers designed to eliminate threats with surgical precision. Cloaked in shadows and armed with weapons that seemed to defy the laws of physics, they were the stuff of nightmares. Their first target was the human colony of New Eden, a bustling hub of resistance activity. The attack was swift and brutal. By the time the sun rose over New Eden's shattered skyline, its leaders were dead, and its people were left to mourn in silence. News of the massacre spread like wildfire, igniting fear and anger in equal measure. Among the human colonies, a name began to surface in hushed tones: Baba Yaga. To some, she was a myth, a ghost story told to frighten children. To others, she was a legend, a warrior whose exploits defied belief. Her origins were shrouded in mystery, but her reputation was undeniable. Baba Yaga was said to be a force of nature, a woman who had walked through the fires of war and emerged unscathed. If anyone could stand against the Empire's assassins, it was her. On a remote outpost far from the Empire's reach, a lone figure stirred. Baba Yaga had long since abandoned the life of a soldier, choosing instead to live in solitude. Her past was a tapestry of blood and fire, and she had no desire to revisit it. But when the call came, carried by a desperate messenger from the colonies, she found herself unable to ignore it. The messenger, a young woman with haunted eyes, spoke of the Empire's atrocities and the people's need for a savior. Baba Yaga listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When the messenger finished, Baba Yaga rose to her feet. Her movements were deliberate, each step carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. "Tell them I'm coming," she said, her voice low and steady. The messenger nodded, relief and fear warring in her eyes. As she left, Baba Yaga turned her gaze to the stars, her mind already calculating the steps ahead. The Empire, meanwhile, was growing impatient. The assassins had been successful in their initial strikes, but the humans' resistance showed no signs of waning. Zorith's advisors urged caution, warning that the humans' desperation could make them unpredictable. But Zorith was not a man who valued caution. "Send more assassins," he ordered. "Crush them utterly. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy the Empire." As the Empire's forces mobilized, Baba Yaga began her preparations. She knew the assassins' strengths and weaknesses, having studied their tactics during her years in the shadows. She gathered weapons and supplies, her movements precise and efficient. But more than anything, she steeled herself for the battles to come. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and they would pay for that mistake. Baba Yaga was no savior, no hero. She was a weapon honed and tempered by years of war. And now she would be unleashed. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo across the stars. The Empire, with its vast resources and cold determination, stood on one side. On the other stood humanity, battered but unbroken, and the woman they called Baba Yaga. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. And when it did, there would be no turning back. The stars burned cold and distant as Baba Yaga's ship cut through the void, a lone speck of defiance against the Empire's vast dominion. She had spent weeks preparing, gathering intelligence, and honing her skills. The assassins were no ordinary foes. They were precision instruments of death, designed to eliminate threats with ruthless efficiency. But Baba Yaga was no ordinary adversary. She was a storm given form, a force of nature that even the Empire could not predict. Her first target was a remote Imperial outpost on the edge of human space. It was a testing ground for the assassins, a place where they trained and refined their techniques. Baba Yaga knew that striking there would send a message, not just to the Empire but to humanity as well. She needed to remind them that they were not alone, that there was still hope. The outpost was a sprawling complex of sleek, angular structures, its defenses formidable but not impenetrable. Baba Yaga approached under the cover of darkness, her movements silent and deliberate. She had studied the outpost's layout, memorized its weak points, and planned her assault with meticulous care. As she slipped past the outer perimeter, she felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was where she belonged, in the heart of danger, where every breath could be her last. Inside the outpost, the assassins moved with mechanical precision, their movements synchronized and efficient. They were a stark contrast to the chaos of battle, their presence a reminder of the Empire's cold, unyielding logic. Baba Yaga watched them from the shadows, her eyes narrowing as she assessed their strengths and weaknesses. She had faced their kind before, but these were different. They were faster, more agile, their enhancements more advanced. The Empire had been busy. She struck without warning, her blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. The first assassin fell before it could react, its body crumpling to the ground. The others turned as one, their movements fluid and coordinated. Baba Yaga met them head-on, her every move a calculated response to their attacks. She was a whirlwind of motion, her strikes precise and unrelenting. The assassins were skilled, but they had never faced someone like her. She was not just a warrior. She was a predator, and they were her prey. The battle was fierce and unyielding, the air filled with the clash of blades and the hum of energy weapons. Baba Yaga moved with a grace that belied her strength, her every action a testament to years of training and experience. She fought not just with her body but with her mind, anticipating her enemies' moves and countering them before they could strike. One by one, the assassins fell, their bodies littering the ground. But the fight was far from over. As the last of the assassins collapsed, a new threat emerged. From the shadows stepped a figure unlike any Baba Yaga had faced before. Tall and imposing, its armor gleamed with an otherworldly light, and its eyes burned with a cold, calculating intelligence. This was no ordinary assassin. This was something more, something worse. The two warriors circled each other, their movements slow and deliberate. Baba Yaga could feel the weight of the assassin's gaze, its presence a tangible force. She knew this would be no ordinary fight. The assassin struck first, its blade moving faster than the eye could follow. Baba Yaga barely managed to block the attack, the force of it sending a shockwave through her body. She countered with a strike of her own, but the assassin dodged with ease, its movements almost preternatural. The battle that followed was a blur of motion and sound, the two combatants moving with a speed and precision that defied comprehension. Baba Yaga pushed herself to her limits, her every move a desperate attempt to gain the upper hand. But the assassin was relentless, its attacks unyielding. It was as if it could anticipate her every move, countering her strikes before she could land them. Just when it seemed that the assassin would overwhelm her, Baba Yaga saw an opening. A split-second hesitation, a flaw in its otherwise perfect defense. She struck with all her strength, her blade piercing the assassin's armor and finding its mark. The creature staggered, its movements faltering. Baba Yaga pressed her advantage, her strikes coming faster and harder until the assassin finally fell, its body collapsing to the ground. Breathing heavily, Baba Yaga stood over the fallen assassin, her body aching from the fight. She knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would not take her defiance lightly. They would send more assassins, stronger and more dangerous than before. But she was ready. She had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer and emerged victorious. The Empire had underestimated her, and they would pay for that mistake. As she left the outpost, the stars above seemed to burn a little brighter. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Baba Yaga felt a flicker of hope. She was not just a weapon. She was a symbol, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was still light. And as long as she drew breath, she would fight to protect that light, no matter the cost. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. And when it did, there would be no turning back. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. News of Baba Yaga's assault on the outpost spread like wildfire, igniting fear and fury in equal measure. Emperor Zorith, his patience worn thin, convened an emergency council. The holographic projections of his advisors flickered around him, their faces grim. "This woman," Zorith said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, "has become more than a nuisance. She is a symbol, and symbols must be crushed." General Vrax stepped forward, his expression as unyielding as the armor he wore. "We've analyzed her tactics, Your Majesty. She's unlike anything we've encountered before. But she's not invincible. We've developed a new breed of assassin, one designed specifically to counter her. It's faster, stronger, and more intelligent. It will not fail." Zoritha's eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating light. "Deploy it, and make sure the galaxy watches. Let them see what happens to those who defy the Empire." Meanwhile, Baba Yaga had returned to the shadows, her body still aching from the battle at the outpost. She knew the Empire would not rest until she was dead, and she had no illusions about the challenges ahead. But she also knew that she could not fight this war alone. The human colonies were scattered and disorganized, their resources stretched thin. If they were to stand a chance against the Empire, they needed to unite. She reached out to the leaders of the resistance, her message simple and direct. "The Empire fears us. That is our strength. But fear alone will not win this war. We must fight together, or we will die alone." Her words struck a chord, and slowly the colonies began to rally. Supplies were shared, intelligence was exchanged, and a fragile network of alliances began to form. Baba Yaga became the linchpin of this effort, her presence a rallying cry for those who had long since given up hope. But the Empire was not idle. Their new assassin, codenamed Nemesis, was a masterpiece of genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancement. It was designed to learn, adapt, and overcome. Its creators had poured every ounce of their knowledge and resources into its creation, and they were confident it would succeed where others had failed. Nemesis was deployed to a key human colony, a bustling hub of resistance activity. The message was clear. This was a test, and the galaxy was watching. Baba Yaga arrived at the colony just as Nemesis began its assault. The scene was chaos, buildings burning, people screaming, and the relentless hum of energy weapons filling the air. She moved through the carnage with a grim determination, her every step bringing her closer to the heart of the battle. She could feel the weight of the Empire's gaze, their anticipation almost palpable. They wanted a spectacle, and she was determined to give them one. Nemesis was waiting for her, its towering form silhouetted against the flames. Its eyes glowed with a cold, mechanical light, and its voice was a deep, resonant growl. "Baba Yaga," it said, the name rolling off its tongue like a curse. "You are a relic, a remnant of a bygone era. The Empire is the future, and you cannot stop it." Baba Yaga said nothing, her expression unreadable. She had faced countless enemies before, each more dangerous than the last. But this was different. Nemesis was not just a weapon. It was a statement, a declaration of the Empire's power and resolve. She knew this fight would be unlike any other. The battle began with a blur of motion, Nemesis striking with a speed and force that defied comprehension. Baba Yaga barely managed to dodge the first blow, the air crackling with the energy of the attack. She countered with a strike of her own, but Nemesis blocked it effortlessly, its movements fluid and precise. The two warriors clashed again and again, their blows shaking the ground and sending shockwaves through the air. Baba Yaga fought with everything she had, her every move a desperate attempt to gain the upper hand. But Nemesis was relentless, its attacks unyielding. It seemed to anticipate her every move, countering her strikes before she could land them. The fight was a brutal, unrelenting test of skill and endurance, each combatant pushing themselves to their limits. As the battle raged on, Baba Yaga began to notice something, a pattern in Nemesis's movements, a flaw in its otherwise perfect defense. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She adjusted her tactics, her strikes becoming more calculated and precise. She feinted, dodged, and struck with a speed and precision that left Nemesis reeling. For the first time, the assassin seemed uncertain, its movements faltering. Baba Yaga pressed her advantage, her every strike bringing her closer to victory. But Nemesis was not so easily defeated. With a roar, it unleashed a devastating attack, the force of it sending Baba Yaga flying through the air. She hit the ground hard, her body aching from the impact. For a moment, she lay there, the world spinning around her. But then she heard it, the faint, desperate cries of the people she had sworn to protect. With a grim determination, Baba Yaga rose to her feet, her body battered but unbroken. She knew this was not just a fight for her survival. It was a fight for the future of humanity. She charged at Nemesis, her every move a testament to her strength and resolve. The two warriors clashed once more, their blows shaking the ground and sending shockwaves through the air. In the end, it was Baba Yaga's indomitable will that turned the tide. With a final, desperate strike, she pierced Nemesis's armor, her blade finding its mark. The assassin staggered, its movements faltering. Baba Yaga pressed her advantage, her strikes coming faster and harder until Nemesis finally fell, its body collapsing to the ground. Breathing heavily, Baba Yaga stood over the fallen assassin, her body aching from the fight. She knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would not take her defiance lightly. They would send more assassins, stronger and more dangerous than before. But she was ready. She had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer and emerged victorious. The Empire had underestimated her, and they would pay for that mistake. As she left the battlefield, the stars above seemed to burn a little brighter. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Baba Yaga felt a flicker of hope. She was not just a weapon. She was a symbol, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was still light. And as long as she drew breath, she would fight to protect that light, no matter the cost. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. And when it did, there would be no turning back.